I remember the weight of my first planet. Not the first planet I ever stood on. That was my birth world, though I barely remember it now, just fragments of ochre dust and the smell of promethium refineries. But the first planet I returned to after my 3rd year aboard the Air's undying resolve. That was when I first understood that gravity had become something different, something that no longer welcomed me. The sensation stays with me even now, decades later, as I stand on the observation deck watching another world slide past our viewport, beautiful and poisonous and forever beyond my reach. They don't tell you during recruitment what the void does to you. The Imperial Navy recruiters who came to our hive spoke of glory and service, of seeing the Emperor's domain spread across the stars, of the honor of serving aboard one of his mighty vessels. They showed us picked captures of grand cruisers, their Gothic spires and cathedral buttresses magnificent against the star fields, and we young fools imagined ourselves as heroes. What they didn't mention was the transformation, the slow remaking that begins the moment you leave your birth world's gravity well and continues with each passing year, until you become something that can never return. I was 17 when I signed my service contract, pressed my thumb to the data slate, and became the property of the Imperial Navy. 3rd son of a mid-hive manufacturer overseer, no prospects, no future except the grinding sameness of assembly line quotas and recycled air. The Navy seemed like escape, like possibility. I remember the shuttle ride up to the orbital dock, the way my stomach lurched as gravity released its grip, how everyone around me vomited into the provided bags except for me. I felt light free, like something had been lifted from my shoulders. I should have recognized that feeling for what it was, the first whisper of the void claiming me as its own. The undying resolve is a lunar-class cruiser, 3 kilometers of armored hull and weapons batteries, home to 12,000 souls who keep her flying, fighting and faithful. I was assigned to Gunnery Deck 7, portside, responsible for maintaining targeting cogitators for Lance batteries 3 through 9. Technical work, requiring steady hands and a good head for mechanical prayer rituals. The work itself was simple enough once you learned the litanies, and I took to it quickly, earning the grudging approval of Chief Gunnery Officer Halak, a scarred veteran who'd served 40 years void side and had the pale, stretched look of someone who'd long ago forgotten what planetary air tasted like. Those first months were intoxicating. The ship had its own rhythm, its own heartbeat of reactor hums and air recycler whispers. You learned to move in the reduced gravity sections with a peculiar gliding step, to grab handholds without thinking, to orient yourself by the feel of the deck, plating vibrations, rather than by any conventional sense of up or down. Sleep came in the narrow crew quarters coffin, like bunks stacked 4 high, where you strapped yourself in and learned to dream without weight, without pressure, without the heavy blanket of atmosphere that makes planet-borne sleep feel secure. We made port at Gannica Station after 3 months of patrol duty, and the entire crew received shore leave in rotating shifts. I remember the excitement, the anticipation of setting foot on something solid again, of breathing air that hadn't been recycled through the same filters for months. The station had a viewing gallery where you could see the planet below. Gannicus Prime, an agri-world of amber fields and processing facilities. I stood at the gallery railing beside my bunkmate Marin, and we both laughed at how strange it felt to stand still without holding on to something. First thing I'm doing is eating something that didn't come from a ration pack, Marin said. His accent was still thick with his birth world's dialect, not yet smoothed away by years of naval standardization. Fresh bread, real vegetables, maybe some actual meat if I can find it. I was thinking the same thing, fantasizing about food that had texture and variety instead of the endless nutritional paste and protein bars that made up shipboard rations. We spent 6 hours on the station, wandering through the commercial sectors, eating until our stomachs hurt, drinking watered down Amasek in a dim bar where off-duty crew members gathered. The station's gravity was only 0.8 standard, lighter than most worlds, but it still felt heavy after months of the ship's variable gravity. My legs ached by the 3rd hour, my back complained, and I found myself looking forward to returning to the undying resolve more than I'd expected. The medical examination before we reboarded was routine, or so I thought. A medica servitor ran a scanner over my body, clicking and wearing as it compiled data. A tech priest with more mechadendrites than human limbs reviewed the results on a glowing green screen, then waved me through without comment. I thought nothing of it. Everyone got scanned. Standard procedure to catch any contamination, any dock, plague or station-borne infection before it could spread through the crew. It was only later, years later, that I understood what they were really checking for. The next planetary leave came 8 months after that, when we docked at a proper orbital above Silencia 2 for resupply and refit. This time we were granted actual planetary leave, 12 hours on the surface, transport shuttle provided, recreational facilities available. The announcement sent a thrill through the crew quarters. Actual ground beneath your feet, actual sky overhead, actual weather that wasn't just temperature, controlled air circulation. Marin and I were in the first shuttle down, pressed into acceleration couches as the small craft dropped through the atmosphere, flames licking at the viewport edges as friction heated the hull. The moment the shuttle doors opened, I felt it. Not the smell of the air, though that was overwhelming. The scent of vegetation and water and wind, complex and organic and utterly unlike the ship's filtered atmosphere. Not the sight of the sky, though that was shocking, actual clouds moving overhead, and actual sun casting shadows that shifted as the world turned. What I felt first was the weight. Silencia 2 was 1.1 standard gravity, heavier than the station had been, heavier than most of the ship except the deepest decks. It pressed down on my shoulders, my spine, my legs. It made each breath feel like work. Feels strange, doesn't it? Marin said beside me, and I could hear the strain in his voice. Like wearing a heavy coat. We adjusted quickly enough. The body is adaptable, resilient, designed by the Emperor's vision to endure. We walked the perimeter of the shuttle port, then took a sanctioned transport into the nearest city, a modest place of low buildings and agricultural processing facilities. The people there looked at us with the mixture of awe and fear that planet-born always show naval crew. We were exotic, touched by the void, marked by service to vessels they would never see except as distant lights in their night sky. I remember trying to run, wanting to feel that childhood sensation of movement, of speed, of physical exertion. My legs felt sluggish, unresponsive, as if I were moving through something thicker than air. After 50 meters I was gasping, my heart pounding against my ribs with uncomfortable force. Marin laughed at me, but he couldn't run any better. We both ended up sitting on a wall, breathing hard, feeling the sweat stick to our skin in a way it never did aboard ship where humidity was carefully controlled. Out of shape, I said between breaths. 3 months, and we'll be back to normal. Marin replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. We spent our 12 hours sampling the local food, drinking actual brewed drinks made from plant matter instead of synthesized compounds, trying to enjoy the experience of being planet-side. But by the 8th hour, my back was screaming with pain. By the 10th, I had a persistent headache that throbbed behind my eyes. When the shuttle recall sounded, I felt more relief than disappointment. The ride back up through the atmosphere felt like shedding a burden, and when we passed through the undying Resolve's airlock, and I felt the familiar lighter gravity embrace me, it was like coming home. The post-leave medical examination was more thorough this time. The tech priest who reviewed my scanner results paused, mechadendrite fingers clicking across input keys, optic implants whirring as they focused on data I couldn't see. Then he made a notation in my file and waved me through. I asked if something was wrong. He said nothing was wrong, just standard readings, natural variations within acceptable parameters. His voice had the flat mechanical quality of someone who'd replaced most of their throat with augmetics, making it impossible to detect any emotional undertone. I thought nothing of it. Why would I? I felt fine once I was back aboard. Better than fine, I felt right, comfortable, at ease in the ship's environment in a way I'd never quite felt on any world. The years passed with the peculiar timelessness of void service. We fought raiders in the Seric sector, participated in a blockade operation above a rebellious Forge world, escorted merchant convoys through the Mandeville points of a dozen systems. I advanced from maintenance technician to targeting specialist to junior gunnery officer, earning my rank insignia and a private quarters, barely larger than my old bunk, but mine alone. I grew skilled at my work, learned to feel the ship's weapons as extensions of my own body, to sense the targeting solutions through the machine, spirits whispered calculations. Marin and I remained close, bound by the shared experience of our first years aboard. He'd taken a different path, specializing in void suit operations, becoming one of the hull walkers who performed external repairs and maintained the ship's outer skin. Dangerous work, but he seemed to thrive on it, spending hours at a time in hard vacuum with only his suit between him and the absolute cold. He spoke sometimes about the beauty of it, the clarity of floating in the void with the ship's hull beneath your magnetic boots and the stars spreading out in every direction, unfiltered by atmosphere or viewport. It's pure out there, he told me once, his eyes distant with the memory. No interference, no distortion, just you and the void and the ship. I can feel the radiation on my skin, even through the suit, like sunlight but sharper, cleaner. Sometimes I think about just disconnecting the safety line and drifting away into it. I understood what he meant, though I'd never done void work myself. There was something about the ship, about the environment of vacuum and radiation and recycled everything, that felt increasingly natural, increasingly right. The brief planetary leaves we received, twice more over the next 3 years, began to feel like intrusions, uncomfortable interruptions of the proper order of things. The third planetary leave was when I first noticed something was wrong. We docked at Praxis Major, a civilized world of actual cities and culture, granted a full 24 hours of surface time. This was supposed to be a gift, a reward for distinguished service during the Cyrix campaign. I should have been excited. Instead, I felt a growing dread as the shuttle descended. The gravity hit me like a physical blow. Praxis Major was 0.95 standard, essentially baseline human norm, but it felt crushing. My knees nearly buckled as I stood up in the shuttle bay. My vision swam with dark spots. I had to grip the bulkhead rail to steady myself, breathing in shallow gasps as my heart raced. "You all right?" someone asked, a new recruit, fresh enough that planetary gravity still felt natural to him. "Fine," I managed. "Just need a moment." But it wasn't fine. Every step felt like wading through mud. My spine creaked with each movement, joints grinding in ways they never did aboard ship. The air felt thick, oppressive, too rich with oxygen. I managed to walk from the shuttle port to a nearby facility, but had to stop every few hundred meters to rest. My hands trembled. Sweet metallic taste flooded my mouth. I recognized it after a moment as blood from where I'd bitten my cheek without realizing. I found Marin in one of the recreation centers, sitting in a chair and staring at his hands with an expression of confused horror. His face was pale, almost gray, and his breathing was labored. "I can't do this," he said when I approached. "Something's wrong. Everything feels wrong." We spent our 24 hours in that recreation center, barely moving, feeling our bodies rebel against the environment. Other crew members seemed to be managing better, walking around, shopping in the markets, enjoying their leave. But I noticed a pattern. The ones who seemed comfortable were either new recruits with less than a year void side, or older crew who looked as miserable as Marin and I felt. There was a dividing line somewhere, an invisible threshold of service time that separated those who could still function planetside from those who couldn't. The shuttle ride back up was agony. The acceleration pressed me into the couch with what felt like impossible force, squeezing my chest, making my bones ache. But as we broke atmosphere and the crushing weight began to ease, relief flooded through me so intensely I almost wept. The transition back to the ship's gravity was like removing armor, like setting down a burden I'd been carrying for far too long. The post-leave medical examination was different this time. Instead of a servitor, an actual human medica conducted it. A woman with iron gray hair, and the clinical detachment of someone who'd seen every variation of human suffering. She ran the scanner slowly, thoroughly, paying particular attention to my bone density readings, my cardiovascular metrics, my cellular composition analysis. "How long have you been experiencing difficulties with standard gravity?" she asked without looking up from her data slate. The question caught me off guard. The last planetary leave was difficult, and the one before that, I thought back, less so, but yes, some discomfort. She made notations, her stylus scratching across the slate's surface. Have you experienced pain in your long bones? Unusual fatigue? Irregular heart rhythm during high-gravity situations? Yes, I admitted, suddenly afraid of what these questions meant. Something wrong with me. She looked at me then, her eyes measuring, evaluating. Nothing wrong, just standard adaptation. You're in the early stages of void adjustment syndrome. It will continue to progress. I'm noting it in your file. You'll need to begin supplemental calcium treatments and undergo weekly bone density monitoring. What does that mean? Will it stop? No, she said simply. It won't stop. It never does. Now if you'll excuse me, I have 200 other crew members to examine. She dismissed me before I could ask more questions, but her words hung in my mind like a pronouncement of sentence. Standard adaptation. Void adjustment syndrome. It will continue to progress. What did that mean? I tried to research it in the ship's archives, but the relevant files were restricted, available only to medical personnel and senior command staff. I asked around among the crew, but no one seemed to know anything, or if they did, they weren't willing to talk about it. Marin was more disturbed by the experience than I was. He became obsessive about it, spending his off-duty hours trying to gather information, questioning anyone who'd served more than 10 years void side. Most refused to discuss it. A few gave cryptic warnings about accepting what you couldn't change. One older crew member, a scarred woman who'd served 30 years aboard various vessels, just laughed at his questions. You're Voidborn now, boy, she said. Or getting there. Stop fighting it. Makes the transition easier. Transition to what? Marin demanded. She looked at him with something like pity. To being what you already are. What you became the moment you left your birth world and came up here. Some of us fight it, try to stay human, try to stay connected to the worlds below. Doesn't work. The void takes everyone eventually. Only question is whether you go gracefully or screaming. Marin didn't go gracefully. 3 months after that conversation, when we docked at Secundus for resupply, he put in a request for extended shore leave. Not the usual 12 or 24 hours, but a full 30-day rotation. He wanted to stay planetside, to force his body to readjust, to reclaim what he thought he was losing. His request was denied. He filed again, denied again. The third time, he didn't file a request. He simply didn't return when his shuttle was recalled. The ship's security searched for him, of course. Procedure demanded it. They found him eventually, or rather they found his corpse in a cheap hab unit in Secundus's lower districts. The official report said heart failure, natural causes, nothing suspicious. But I spoke to one of the security officers who'd been at the scene, and after several drinks in the crew lounge, he told me what he'd really seen. His bones. The officer said, voice low, not meeting my eyes. They were like glass that had been put under too much pressure. Compound fractures everywhere, ribs, legs, arms, spine, like something had crushed him from the inside out. His organs were wrong too, all swollen and displaced. And his blood. He stopped, took another drink. His blood had crystallized in his veins. I've seen combat deaths, explosive decompression, plague victims, everything you can imagine. Never seen a body do what his did. I reported this to Chief Gunnery Officer Halak, thinking surely someone should know. Surely this was something that required investigation. Halak listened to my report with the same patient expression he used when junior officers proposed tactical modifications that violated established doctrine. Density sickness, he said when I finished. It's what happens when void-adapted crew spend too much time in standard gravity. The body can't handle the pressure anymore. Systems fail. It's in the medical files if you have clearance to access them. Which you don't. But why didn't anyone tell him? Why didn't anyone warn him? Halak's scared face shifted into something that might have been sympathy. Everyone's told, just not with words. Why do you think medical examinations get more thorough the longer you serve? Why do you think planetary leave times get shorter? Why do you think senior crew rarely leave the ship at all? He leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. Or would have, if there'd been enough gravity to make it creak. You're told through 1,000 small actions, 1,000 subtle changes in protocol. Your friend didn't want to see it, tried to fight it. That's always fatal. But what is it? What's happening to us? You're becoming Voidborn, Halak said, using that word the old woman had used, making it sound both simple and irrevocable. Your body is adapting to the environment you live in. Bones losing density because they don't need to support your weight against strong gravity. Cardiovascular system adjusting to lower pressure. Cellular structure changing to better handle radiation exposure. It's evolution, son. Accelerated, unavoidable evolution. The void makes you into what it needs you to be. I wanted to deny it, to reject what he was saying. But I couldn't. I'd felt it myself. Felt the changes accumulating in my body, felt the increasing wrongness of planetary environments. The void wasn't just where I worked. It was what I was becoming. How long? I asked. How long do we have before we can't go planetside at all? Halak considered the question, his augmented eye clicking as it focused and refocused. Varies by individual. Some make it 8 years, some 12. I lasted 15 before I had my last planetary leave. That was 25 years ago. Haven't set foot on a world since. Don't plan to. And the Navy knows. The Imperium knows this happens. Of course they know. They depend on it. You think it's coincidence that the most effective void crews are the ones who've served longest? We're not distracted by thoughts of home, by dreams of planetside retirement, by the 1,000 small connections that keep people tethered to worlds. We're void-born. This ship is our world, our home, our grave. We serve until we die because we can't do anything else. He said it without bitterness, just stating facts, and that somehow made it worse. This wasn't a conspiracy or a cover-up. It was just the natural consequence of void service, acknowledged but unspoken, accepted but never explained. The Imperium didn't force anyone to become void-born. It simply created the conditions where transformation was inevitable, then allowed that transformation to proceed without interference. I became obsessed after that, studying everything I could access about void adaptation, bone density loss, cardiovascular adjustment. The official medical literature was dry, clinical, carefully neutral in its terminology. It spoke of adjustment periods and environmental acclimation and physiological optimization for void service. Never used words like transformation or change or point of no return. But the data was clear enough if you knew how to read it. Human bone density decreased at approximately 3% per year in sustained low-gravity environments. After 10 years, you'd lost 30% of your bone mass. Your skeleton was still functional in low gravity, but it couldn't support standard gravity loads anymore. Weight-bearing became dangerous, fractures common. Cardiovascular systems adjusted similarly. Hearts became more efficient at moving blood in low-pressure environments, but struggled to generate sufficient pressure against gravity's pull. Blood vessels weakened, unable to maintain proper circulation when fighting gravitational force. The changes went deeper than that, though. Cellular structure itself shifted, chromosomal markers altered by constant radiation exposure, genetic expression patterns modified by the environmental pressures of void life. Your red blood cell count increased to compensate for lower oxygen availability. Your retinas became more sensitive to dim light, better adapted to the ship's interior illumination, but painfully overwhelmed by planetary sunlight. Your inner ear fluid thickened, giving you perfect balance in microgravity, but leaving you dizzy and disoriented in standard gravity. You weren't just adapting to void life. You were becoming something that could only exist in void conditions. Something that would die if forced to return to the environments humanity evolved for. I watched it happen to myself over the next 5 years. Watched my bone density readings drop year after year despite the supplemental calcium treatments and mandated resistance exercises. Watched my cardiovascular metrics shift toward patterns the medical literature labeled as void optimal, but I recognized as planet lethal. Watched my skin become pale and thin, my eyes become sensitive, my sense of balance become completely dependent on artificial gravity fields. The ship became more than my workplace, it became my ecosystem. My environment, the only place where my body functioned correctly. I could feel the reactors hum through my bones, could sense pressure changes in the ventilation systems, could identify which section of the ship I was in by the subtle variations in deck plating vibrations. I was developing the same stretched, elongated look that marked long-term void cruise, my body becoming optimized for the conditions I lived in. Planetary leave became impossible. The last time I tried, a brief 4-hour stint on Margrave Station, which was only 0.6 gravity, I collapsed within an hour, blood vessels rupturing in my eyes and nose, bones grinding in ways that made me scream. They had to carry me back to the shuttle on a grav stretcher, and I spent 3 days in medical recovering from what the Medica called acute density response. The official recommendation in my file after that was, no further planetary exposure recommended. Not prohibited, just not recommended. As if it were a choice, as if I could decide to go planetside if I really wanted to. The truth was I didn't want to. The thought of planetary gravity filled me with a primal terror now, a bone-deep certainty that it would kill me. I'd become something that belonged exclusively to the void, something that would be destroyed by the environments that spawned humanity. I made full gunnery officer at 30, 5 years of age, 20 years after my initial recruitment. The promotion came with command of my own battery section, direct authority over 37 technicians and gunners, and a larger quarters with an actual viewport instead of just picked screens. I spent my off-duty hours at that viewport, watching the void slide past, watching planets and moons drift by like beautiful, poisonous fruits hanging just out of reach. Sometimes I thought about Marin, about his body crushed under the weight of standard gravity, bones shattering, organs failing, blood crystallizing in veins that couldn't handle normal pressure anymore. He'd tried to go back, tried to reclaim what he'd been. I'd accepted what I was becoming, and I'd survived. That seemed like wisdom at first, like maturity and acceptance. But in darker moments, I wondered if Marin's death might have been the more merciful path. He'd died still thinking of himself as human, still connected to humanity's ancestral environments. I was alive but no longer human in any meaningful sense, transformed into something that could only exist in the artificial environments of void ships, forever separated from the worlds where my species evolved. The undying resolve's captain was a man named Caudle, 73 years old, 56 of them spent void side. He looked like something carved from pale stone, skin stretched tight over bones that were probably hollow as bird skeletons. I'd seen him exactly 3 times in my 20 years of service, always in the command throne on the bridge, always strapped in and connected to the ship's systems through a web of cables and data feeds. Rumor said he couldn't walk anymore, that his bones would snap under even light gravity, that he was kept alive through augmetics and sheer stubborn will. I was summoned to his presence in my 21st year of service. The command deck was at the ship's highest level, deep in the densest radiation zones, where shielding was thickest and gravity was lightest. I had to cycle through 3 airlocks to reach it, each one reducing pressure and gravity incrementally until I arrived in an environment that felt more like hard vacuum than inhabited space. Captain Caudle hung in his command throne like a spider in a web, skeletal fingers moving across control interfaces with mechanical precision. His eyes were pure augmetic now, glowing red optics that tracked my approach with inhuman accuracy. "Gunnery officer," he said, his voice transmitted through Vox speakers rather than spoken. I wasn't certain he had lungs capable of speech anymore. "You have served well. Your efficiency ratings are exemplary. Your loyalty is unquestioned. I am offering you a choice." The word, choice, seemed wrong coming from him, from this thing that had once been human, but was now more ship component than crew member. "Sir, there is an opening in senior command structure. My master of ordnance is being transferred to a new vessel, a rare occurrence, and I require a replacement. The position is yours if you want it. It requires permanent residency in the command deck, full integration with the ship's weapon systems, and extensive augmentation to interface properly with the gunnery cogitators. You would become part of the undying resolve, in a more literal sense than current crew." I understood what he was offering. Not a promotion in the traditional sense, but a transformation, a final severing of whatever threads still connected me to baseline humanity. I would become like him, like all senior command staff on long voyage vessels, more machine than man, more ship than crew, permanently bonded to the vessel that had already claimed my body and was now offering to claim what remained of my identity. And if I refuse? I asked. You continue your current duties. No penalty, no judgment. Many prefer to retain their humanity as long as possible. But understand, the changes will continue regardless. In another 10 years, you will be incapable of functioning in the lower decks. Your body will require the low-pressure, low-gravity environment of the upper levels. Eventually, you will be command, deck-bound whether you choose augmentation or not. I am simply offering you the opportunity to embrace what you will inevitably become. I looked at him, this thing that might once have been a young recruit like me, full of dreams and ambitions and humanity. The transformation I'd undergone was nothing compared to what had been done to him, what he had allowed to be done to himself. But was he wrong? Was this not simply the final stage of the process that had begun the moment I'd left my birth world? May I ask, sir, did you have a choice when you were offered this position? The red optics focused on me with what might have been amusement. I was given the same choice you have now. I accepted because I understood what the alternative meant: slow deterioration, increasing disability, eventual confinement to medical quarters as my body continued to adapt to conditions it could not survive in. This way, I became useful. I became necessary. I became eternal. Eternal. The word hung in the recycled air like a benediction and a curse. Eternal servitude, eternal duty, eternal separation from everything humanity had evolved for, but also eternal purpose, eternal belonging, eternal freedom from the weight of gravity and expectation and change. I should have refused. I should have clung to what remained of my humanity, should have chosen the slow decline rather than the surgical transformation. But I didn't. I accepted because I understood, finally, that I had been choosing this path for 21 years, that every day I spent aboard ship was a vote for this future, that my body had already committed itself to this transformation whether my mind accepted it or not. The augmentation procedures took 3 months. They hollowed out my bones further, replacing marrow with nutrient gel that could sustain cellular function without requiring standard gravity circulation. They reinforced my skeleton with carbide struts, turning me into something that could bear weight through structural support rather than bone density. They modified my cardiovascular system, adding secondary hearts and pressure regulators that could function across a wider range of environmental conditions. They replaced my eyes with augmetic optics that could see into spectrums baseline humans couldn't perceive, allowing me to watch radiation patterns and energy signatures directly. The worst part was the neural integration. They drilled sockets into my skull, connecting my brain directly to the ship's weapon systems, allowing me to feel the lance batteries as extensions of my own body, to sense targeting solutions through the machine, spirits calculations, to become a living interface between human judgment and mechanical execution. The pain was extraordinary, overwhelming, a fire that burned through every synapse and left me screaming into the medical bay's sterile air. But when it was over, when I was installed in my position as Master of Ordnance, when I first felt the full scope of the undying resolve's weapons systems flowing through my consciousness like blood through veins, I understood. This wasn't transformation. This was completion. This was becoming what I had always been meant to be, what the void had been sculpting me toward since that first shuttle ride decades ago. I am 53 years old now. I have served 36 years aboard the undying resolve. I have not felt planetary gravity in 28 years. I could not survive it if I tried. My bones would shatter, my hearts would fail, my augmetics would malfunction under the electromagnetic interference of atmospheric conditions. I am voidborn in the truest sense, born of the void, shaped by the void, incapable of existing anywhere except the void. We are approaching Tertius Station now, and I can see through the ship's sensors that there is a fresh batch of recruits waiting at the orbital dock. Young men and women, 17 or 18 years old, signing their service contracts, pressing their thumbs to data slates, becoming property of the Imperial Navy. They think they are choosing adventure, glory, service to the Emperor. They don't understand they are choosing transformation, that they are stepping across a threshold They will never be able to return through. I want to warn them. I want to tell them what will happen, what they will become, what they will lose. But what would be the point? The Navy needs Voidborn, needs people who can serve aboard its vessels for decades without the distraction of planetside connections. The Imperium requires eternal servants, and it has perfected the process of creating them. You volunteer freely, you serve faithfully, and the void remakes you until return becomes impossible. By the time you understand what has been done to you, it is far too late to choose differently. Sometimes, in the quiet cycles when the ship is running on minimum activity and most of the crew is sleeping, I access the external cameras and look at the planets we pass. I remember distantly what it felt like to stand on solid ground, to feel wind on my skin, to smell air that had blown across living things. The memories are fading now, worn smooth by decades of recycled atmosphere and artificial gravity. Soon they will be gone entirely, and I will be truly void-born, not just in body but in mind, with no connection to planetary existence, no frame of reference for what baseline humanity experiences. I wonder sometimes if this is evolution or devolution, if we void-born are humanity's future or its tragedy, but that is probably the wrong question. The void doesn't care about evolution or tragedy. It simply takes what enters it and reshapes it to suit void conditions, just as water wears down stone, just as radiation alters cellular structure, just as time changes everything it touches. The recruits are boarding now. I can sense them through the ship's systems, feel their biological signatures as they cross into the air's undying resolve's lower decks. Fresh blood, fresh bone density, fresh humanity that will be slowly, methodically, inevitably transformed into something else. Some of them will resist, like Marin did, and their resistance will kill them. Some will accept, like I did, and their acceptance will consume them. Either way, the void wins. The void always wins. This is why ship crews never step foot on a planet, not because we are forbidden, but because we become incapable. The void takes us, remakes us, perfects us for service in the Emperor's fleet. We become eternal servants, eternal guardians, eternal prisoners of the environment that has claimed us. We are void-born, and we can never go home, because home is gravity and atmosphere and conditions that would kill us as surely as vacuum kills the unprotected. I am master of ordnance aboard the undying resolve. I am 40% augmetic by volume, 60% by function. I have 13 hearts, 2 biological, 11 mechanical. My bones are hollow and reinforced with carbide. My blood is supplemented with nanomachines that repair radiation damage. My consciousness is partially distributed across 17 neural junction points throughout the gunnery systems. I am no longer precisely human in any meaningful sense, but I am useful. I am necessary, I am eternal. And when I look at the new recruits filing through the airlocks, I see my past, my lost humanity, my forgotten connection to the worlds below, and I know that in 20 years, 30 years, if they survive, they will stand where I stand now, looking down at the next generation of recruits, remembering what they used to be before the void claimed them. The cycle continues. The transformation never stops. New recruits become experienced crew, become voidborn, become something beyond voidborn, each generation accepting what they cannot change, becoming what they cannot escape. The Imperial Navy requires eternal servants, and it has perfected the process of creating them. You sign the contract freely, you serve faithfully, and the void does the rest. I am voidborn. I will never step foot on a planet again, not because I am forbidden, but because I am physically incapable, because my body has been remade into something that can only exist in the artificial environments of void ships, because I have been perfected for service in the Emperor's fleet. This is not a tragedy. This is not even particularly unusual. This is simply how the Navy functions, how void service works, how the Imperium maintains its fleet across the galaxy. Voidborn crews are the most reliable, the most efficient, the most dedicated, not because they are specially trained or particularly devout, but because they have nowhere else to go, nothing else they can be, no alternative except death. The medical examinations we undergo after each planetary leave are not checking for contamination. They are measuring the progression of our transformation, documenting the changes that make return impossible, ensuring we are developing properly into the servants the void requires. The restrictions on leave time, the careful management of gravity exposure, the supplemental treatments, all of it is designed to manage our transformation, to ensure it proceeds at the optimal rate, to create the perfect balance between human judgment and void adaptation. I understand now why Captain Caudle offered me that choice all those years ago. He wasn't giving me the opportunity to resist transformation. He was offering me the chance to embrace it consciously, to participate actively in what was happening to me anyway, to find meaning and purpose in the inevitable rather than simply succumbing to it. Some crews resist their transformation until their bodies fail. Others accept it and become what the void needs them to be. The Navy doesn't care which path you choose. Both produce Voidborn in the end. But conscious acceptance makes the process smoother, makes the crew more effective, makes the transformation feel like choice rather than curse. The new recruits will learn this eventually. Some quickly, some slowly, some never. But understanding or not, they will transform. The void will claim them, remakes them, perfect them for eternal service aboard his imperial vessels. They will become voidborn, as I am voidborn. As everyone who serves long enough becomes voidborn, they will lose their connection to the planets of humanity's birth and evolution, will become creatures of artificial environments and recycled everything, will discover that they have been remade into something that cannot return. And they will serve. They will serve until they die, because they cannot do anything else. Because the void has made them into perfect eternal servants who have no alternative except service, no escape except death, no hope except the grim satisfaction of duty fulfilled. This is why ship crews never step foot on a planet. This is the secret the Navy keeps without keeping it secret, the truth that is never spoken but always known, the transformation that is never explained but always occurs. We are voidborn. We belong to the void. And the void never lets us leave. I am master of ordnance aboard the undying resolve. I am voidborn. I am eternal. I am necessary. I am exactly what the Imperium needs me to be. And when I look at the fresh recruits boarding now, I do not pity them. I do not warn them. I simply watch as they take their first steps across the threshold that will never let them return. Watch as they begin the transformation. They do not yet understand. Watch as the void claims another generation to serve in eternal darkness between the stars. We are voidborn. We serve the Emperor's fleet. We can never go home. And that is exactly as it should be.